No matter what we try to do to avoid them, distractions are prevalent in every aspect of life. This is never truer than while trying to write your novel. And this is because the very thing that allows you to create those amazing plots, characters, and settings is what inevitably gets in the way of what you are trying to accomplish. The fact is, by opening up your mind to allow yourself access to all of those great ideas floating around, you have simultaneously engaged your imagination. The problem is, once you have that great idea, your imagination doesn't simply shut down. It's still in active mode, which keeps your mind open to any and all external distractions. However, with the proper focus, this can work in your favor. Time for another of my little tales. The body of a man in his mid 50s is found dead in his 41st story office, a top tier accountant that handled a lot of the firm's high end clients. It was the weekend cleaning lady who first discovered the body around 11 a.m. Saturday morning. When the first respondents arrived, they examined the body and noticed the gunshot wound to the side of the head. With orders not to touch the body, Detective Chief Inspector Wright was called in to investigate. "I think this is another open and shut case," said Detective Constable Montague. "I took the liberty of examining the crime scene and all the evidence points to suicide." "And what evidence is that?" asked Detective Chief Inspector Wright. "Well, to start, soon after I arrived, I spotted the cassette recorder under the victim's right hand and a gun in his left. Using my pen so to not disturb any potential fingerprints, I pushed play and heard the deceased voice state, 'My life isn't worth living.' Then, immediately following, I heard the undeniable sound of a gunshot. Also, the guard on duty was the last one to leave last night before doing his rounds and locking up the building at 7:35 p.m. He can attest to the fact that there was no other person in the building. No one came into the building until this morning, and that was by the cleaning lady who arrives every Saturday morning by 6:30 a.m. and cleans, reaching this office at about 11 a.m. I was also able to get statements from some of the other accountants that confirmed the deceased was under a great deal of stress over messing up on a multi-million-dollar account that cost the firm's client a great deal of embarrassment. Like I said, open and shut case of suicide. Then Detective Chief Inspector Wright looked down at the deceased and the items on the desk. "I'm afraid it isn't as open and shut as you may think. This man didn't kill himself. It's obvious. He was murdered." Today, I will be talking about the difference between distractions and a lack of focus. And then I'll tell you how Detective Chief Inspector Wright knew that it was murder. Let's say you have settled on a plot where a young man, your main character, steps into a seemingly ordinary closet and finds himself stepping out the other side 165 years in the past. While you're eagerly creating your story, the doorbell rings. It's actually a FedEx courier delivery person with a package for you to sign. But your mind, still open to external inspiration, has now conjured up a concept where the courier is a soldier from the Civil War, delivering a dispatch. Later, after you manage to get back on track with your story, your cat, Django, which has been sitting quietly by the window, suddenly leaps across your computer. Although its reaction was just from the subconscious act of you brushing its toy mouse off your desk, your active imagination has catapulted your mind onto a new concept. You are in the Serengeti jungles when a lion leaps in front of you on your way back to camp. Later, after you manage to get your imagination under control and you settle back into your young man in the closet concept, your 5-year old daughter, who you gave explicit instructions to never speak while you are working at your computer, decides to get your attention by flicking the light switch on and off repeatedly. You know it's just her way of reminding you that it's time to go to the park as promised. But your mind conjures up a concept where you are in occupied France during the Second World War. The Germans have just begun bombing the area, and the apartment complex where you and several others are hiding is suddenly shaken by their bombs, causing the lights to flicker. Distractions are a part of doing business when you're a writer. Even the great writers throughout history had distractions. Maybe even while trying to write a story in occupied France while the Germans were attacking. The difference is you need to find a way to work through these distractions. You need to maintain a workable degree of focus. For a writer, with the ability to maintain a certain degree of focus, this opens up several good opportunities to take your story to different levels while realizing an assortment of diverse plot lines along with their respective settings. You've already established that your protagonist goes into his closet and is somehow transported 165 years into the past. Here, you have the opportunity to have your character arriving during the Civil War, where he is given a dispatch thanks to the interruption of the FedEx guy. On the other hand, you could allow your imagination to expand further and by doing so, take your protagonist to a small town where his grandfather grew up. His journey there is simply for the purpose of finding out what he wrote on the missing half of a letter that your protagonist found while digging through old family photos in the present. Good place for the introduction of another plot line that introduces the dispatch near the end of the Civil War that somehow ended up with your protagonist's grandfather while he was still a small child. You go on to write that circumstances have created a situation where your protagonist is unable to see his grandfather due to the fact he has been sent away for his safety during the war, but will be brought home later once it is safe. That is when your protagonist writes a note for his grandfather. It is left with the occupants of the house with the explicit instructions that they make certain he receives it on his return. You would need a great deal of focus to keep both of these plot lines on a coherent path, not only for yourself so you can create them effectively, but also for your reader so they can understand them correctly. Your protagonist's closet is able to not only transport him back in time, but to somewhere in the world. So, when he emerges in the Serengeti 200 years in the past, he is in search of his great grandfather, the great lion hunter. When that lion cub leaps across the path of your protagonist, it is only then that he realizes he is within striking distance of the lioness. She sees him as a threat to her cub and intends to take the necessary action to protect her young. With the lioness crouched and ready to leap, a shot is fired, frightening her away. Your protagonist turns and is suddenly face to face with the man who has just saved his life, his great grandfather. Your protagonist convinces him to accompany him through the closet in search of his son, which is your protagonist's grandfather. The two eventually embark on this journey and arrive in the midst of the Civil War, where their quest is to retrieve the dispatch and get it to your protagonist's grandfather. A great deal more focus is required here. As you expand your imagination to incorporate this new thread of plot and time and place of your new settings, any number of distractions are in a good position to take you off track. Okay, I feel like I'm on a roll, so I'll add a little more. Your protagonist steps into his closet and emerges around 80 years in the past. He is in occupied France. He is in search of the dispatch that he recently discovered is no longer with his grandfather during the time of the Civil War. But all is not lost because his grandfather had told him that his father, living in France during World War II, was the last of his family to have the dispatch. After your protagonist emerges during a German air raid, he finds himself in an apartment with several other people. While the bombs continue to fall all around them, a little girl, about the age of 5, is hiding beside a small side table that holds the only light in the room as it flickers on and off each time a bomb explodes outside. She is holding the hand of a little boy. Your protagonist soon comes to realize that the little girl is his aunt and the little boy she is holding the hand of is his father. He recognizes them from old family photos from the present. It is after the bombing has stopped that your protagonist walks over to the two children and explains who he is and what he's doing there. That's when the little boy, your protagonist's father, reaches into his pocket and pulls out the dispatch he had been given by his father, your protagonist's grandfather. Your protagonist reads it and realizes that the dispatch is really the note he had written and left with the occupants of the house during the Civil War. The portion of the note that had remained missing for so many years was what he himself had written when he couldn't locate his grandfather. The note read as follows: You may be too young to understand this, but I am your family and have come a long way to find you. I know you have been taken away from the war for your safety. I am in search of the dispatch that was given to you. Please keep it safe until the day that I will return. Whenever you delve into stories that deal with past and future events, it's usually the one trying to get to the bottom of a situation that actually caused the situation in the first place by time traveling. Having said that, you can understand how imperative it is for a writer who endeavors to take on such a story to be well focused and avoid as many distractions as possible, or at the very least, incorporate them into that story. But even if you are writing a story where you have only a couple of characters and a setting that doesn't take them out of the present time, you will still need to be able to focus on the task at hand, because if you cannot, not only will you lose your train of thought, which allows you to keep your characters and setting in order, you will also lose your reader. Because your reader isn't there to try to make sense of where you went off the rails. They are there to simply enjoy the ride you take them on until you bring them to a satisfying end. And now I'll tell you the ending to the story I call The Telling of the Tape. Detective Chief Inspector Wright not only knew that it was a murder, but he also knew it was the guard on duty who had killed him. The guard claimed that there was no other person in the building when he locked up at 7:35 p.m., but it is evident that the decedent was still there. Also, as per usual, Detective Chief Inspector Wright did a little background checking before he arrived on the scene and discovered that the guard had only been working in the building for approximately 2 weeks. Further investigation proved that he used to work directly for the client that the decedent embarrassed when he messed up their multi-million-dollar account. They had obviously placed the guard there to murder the accountant for his failings. The inspector then glanced down at the desk. There are two things that tell me without a doubt that this is murder. The first thing being that it would be unlikely for anyone holding a gun in their left hand to acquire that bullet hole in the right side of their head. Then the inspector asked Detective Constable Montague if the gunshot came immediately following the decedent's voice on the cassette recorder, and all you had to do was to push play to hear it, and since it's very much impossible for the decedent to rewind the tape after he was shot in the head, leaves us with only one possible conclusion. The murderer is the one who rewound the tape. Thanks for watching, and if you found anything that I said beneficial to you in any way, hit that subscribe button because you never know. My next video might just be helpful too.
Dreaming music.